Good afternoon, everyone. 4 o'clock straight up on a Wednesday edition of Middays with Q. Rich Quinones here. We'll take you up to about 5 o'clock or so. A little rapid hour on a very busy August 13th. It is a Woosah Wednesday, as we like to say, on this August 13th, 2025. Very busy show. Get in on the conversation. We are live on my YouTube channel as well as X, two multiple YouTube channels as well. Caribbean Deportes talk as well. So check us out. We've got some notes that we will go over later on in the week as far as different platforms that we're going to be going on and partnering up moving forward. But as always, we want you guys to get connected with me on social at Rich Q on Q, X and IG, TikTok, Rich Q on the mic. Like, comment, and subscribe to my channel as well. Costco in about 15 or so minutes. Hope everyone had a good Sports Tuesday. Baseball starting to heat up. NFL preseason again in the mix this weekend. You've got some signings, some, I guess you can say, contracts that were handed out to some big time players over the last week or two. We'll get into that. Some running backs getting paid. Shador Sanders will most likely be out of this next preseason game against the Philadelphia Eagles for the Cleveland Browns. Apparently, an oblique scare right there. So right now he's day to day with an oblique strain. Um, you might want to say, how is that going to affect his standing as far as the depth chart? We'll dive into that. A lot of baseball scores we want to get into. You got the issue in the NBA with Porter Jr. talking about gambling. You've got the issue in the NFL with Gruden as well versus the NFL. Costco, as I mentioned, about 10 to 15. And we want to talk about some of these teams right now, in college hoops. I'm sorry, in college football, mind you. I'm jumping the gun already. In college football, mind you, this top 10, top 15, top 20 preseason. And I know there's been a lot of angst over some of these lists. People get so bent out of shape. They really do. They get bent out of shape when you start to talk about these lists. And I don't know why everyone gets so bent out of shape. I don't, again, if you ask me, it's really not a big deal. It really isn't. But as I alluded to, we like to get up in arms over these lists, and that's what everyone loves to do. So we'll go through the preseason gamut as well, and we'll have a little fun with Costco in that regard. Get his thoughts on what's cooking, so to speak, in that regard. But again, like I said, you can argue and you can try to make sense of some of these rankings. When we start to look at uh, we're what, a week or two away, so we almost you get to the point where you're like, okay, well, does it really make sense? How does this team jump this team? How does this team leapfrog this team? Why is this team, you know, at the 2 or the 3 or the 4 spot? So, as I mentioned, we'll get into it. We'll have a little fun with Costco. Always good to chime in and hear from him as well. But as I mentioned, we'll open it up. You guys can get connected with us as well. As I mentioned, a lot of baseball going down on this day. We'll get you caught up to speed with some scores around Major League Baseball. We are getting in the crunch time right now. Crunch time, crunch time, crunch time in the NFL, and crunch time in baseball. I love the pennant races. Pennant races are fantastic. I absolutely love pennant races. I love the fact that you can really get involved in the pennant races. I love the fact that you can. If you think about it, you've got some very good, um, you know, odds going out there as well with some of these teams, which is always interesting when we start to talk about some of these matchups. So we'll dive into that. And also, too, with the updated odds, that's another thing. When you start to talk about the NL, AL, MVP, that's something we also would like to get into a little bit today. So, as I mentioned, busy, 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 busy show to dive into and a lot of stuff to break down on this day. Costco is going to be joining us. We'll have a little fun with him. And then we will break down everything from A to Z. And as we typically do, let me get you caught up to speed on some scores going on right now, a couple minutes past 4 o'clock hour. And we will get into that as well. So this is what we got right now. Baseball wise, we've got Tigers up on the White Sox 1-0. You got the Brewers over the Pirates 6-5. Royals, they are trailing the Nationals 7-6. And then the Rockies right now, they are trailing the Cardinals 5-4. Rangers over the Diamondbacks 3-2. Phillies later, that's a 5-10 first pitch. And then you got the Mets and Alonso. Congratulations to him breaking Straw's record with the home runs. You got the Yankees, which, listen, it's almost panic time right now, right? If you are a Yankees fan, you got Minnesota tonight. So we'll go around the diamond as well. Costco in about 10 to 15. We'll get into college football. We've got a bunch, as I mentioned, a bunch um, of top 15, top 20 to get into. We'll also get into some NFL nuggets. I also want to mention the Porter stuff. So you take about 5 or so tonight before we hit the boxing trail. Keep it locked in, 4 o'clock hour. So this is kind of where we're at with the NFL with preseason. And we kind of dived into this a little bit, right? We kind of dived into this a little bit. First of all, some news and notes with the NFL. So apparently Odell Beckham Jr. had to kind of come out and say, whoa, 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 I'm not retired just yet. Now, I don't know if a team's going to take a flyer on Beckham, but we shall see. You had the Bills, and listen, I thought this was a move that was smart by the Buffalo Bills. You're going to lock up a very good running back. So again, listen, man, you're banging out with Cook 4 years, 48 million. Um, this is it for the Buffalo Bills. We talk about make or break opportunity for Buffalo. We talk about a make or break opportunity in an AFC where it's going to get very, very tough. It's going to get difficult. You got some young teams on the rise. You got other teams trying to regroup. You got Cincinnati trying to figure out the defense. Kansas City's still going to take that step back, but you still have Kansas City. Patriots are going to be better. I don't know what's going to happen with Miami. You got the Baltimore Ravens. You got the AFC South. As I mentioned, you have some young teams coming up as well, like the Denver Broncos. So it's yet to be seen how it's going to play out, but I thought it was a smart move by the Buffalo Bills. And as I mentioned too, if you're a Browns fan and you thought you were going to have an opportunity to go see him, Shedeur Sanders against Philadelphia Eagles during preseason right now, injured in oblique throwing Wednesday morning. He was held out the first day of joint practice with the Eagles. So there's going to be more medical testing, examination. It revealed pretty much an oblique strain. He's considered day-to-day, won't practice on Thursday, which basically means he's unlikely to play in the game on Saturday against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, it's unfortunate because it's the worst timing. You wanted to see him get some reps in, and now you have to wonder, all right, so does that mean we'll see him in week 3 of the preseason when the Rams play the Browns? And that'll be in Cleveland, that game. That'll be a 1 o'clock game on the NFL Network. The NFL Network knows exactly what they're doing. They're trying to get, as I mentioned, I will say this. If you are, if you look at how some of this plays out with some of these quarterbacks, man, I'll tell you, it's kind of like the worst opportunity to get hurt, if that makes sense. Like that's the last thing you want is have to deal with some of these injuries, especially when you know and believe you were playing pretty well. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. It is what it is. Now, I think, again, if he can get a game or two in after this, if he can get some more reps prior to the season, all you're going to do is make the conversation that much more engaging when it comes to Stefanski and how they want to approach this situation. So that's all I'm saying. That's the way I look at it. That's the way I look on it. By the way, we're on X. We're also on my multiple YouTube channels as well. We're trying something a little different today. We'll be on Facebook later on in the week. We've got some show announcements to make as well. A couple different platforms that we'll be testing out. So we're on 2 different channels. You can get me on my regular channel, but also we partnered up with a couple other channels that we are just going to be feeling out over the next week or two. And we'll be doing a couple hours here and there. And Back Your Play is going to be back. We'll have a announcement where Back Your Play will be heard. We've got 2 platforms that are going to be carrying our sports betting pod as well for the NFL season. So, all right, quick timeout. We'll reset the table. Costco on the other side. We're also on X today. Keep it locked in. We'll take a very fast time out. You guys will see you on the other side. As I mentioned, we got about an hour plus to play with on a very busy Woosah Wednesday edition of Middays with Q. All right, 10 minutes past 4 o'clock hour, Woosah Wednesday edition, Middays with Q. Rich Quinones here. We got about 60 plus to play with. We got the fights later on this evening. We'll be back in the saddle tomorrow and Friday. As I mentioned, we've got some show news and notes to kind of drop going forward for the NFL season. We are very happy to announce we found two other homes for BYP Back Your Play, so we're excited about that as well. But as I mentioned, we are talking some college football. Our good friend Nick Cosco from On Three Sports, kind enough to join us on a very busy Wednesdays. We kind of get over that hump and we talk about all these absolutely ridiculous rankings when it comes to the preseason polls and college football, and everyone's so bent out of shape. And here we go. How is the vacay, by the way? How is the celebratory birthday vacay?
It was nice. Thanks for asking. It's nice to, other than the traffic getting back down from Rhode Island to Jersey, that's the only bad part about that trip. But yeah, pretty good. Nice to get away for a couple of days and right back to it. And then I just talked to for the folks in our South Jersey backyard, mainland coach Chuck Smith last night. So be sure to check that out on Cape Atlantic Live. But that just means football season's right around the corner. So at a certain point, Rich, I know we're going to be done talking about preseason, and what if this happens, what if that happens,
Yeah.
so on and so forth. So I'm almost fed up with projections, but we're about 2 weeks away. So hang in there, everybody.
Yeah, I mean, listen, listen. Everyone can kind of do with this as as they want because
Mhm.
it is somewhat of a joke, and I know people get so bent out of shape, you know, so bent out of shape with everything. I mean, you look at the top 25, right? So Georgia comes in at number 5, so of course everyone's going to be all because you're more upset about this, and you got the team right in front of them, which is Clemson. You got Penn State earning their highest ranking since 1997. Which again, if you're Ohio State, you're probably pissed off because you pretty much ran through a 14 college football playoff with really no problems. You take down Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and Notre Dame, and here you go. It's to me, the rankings are in essence a list. That's
Mhm.
really that's really all it is to me when you look at it. So when you see, and we'll go through it, the preseason rankings when they come out, what were your first initial thoughts? Did you just kind of roll your eyes?
Yeah, for the most part, was I figured, you're probably gonna get a team like Texas is probably gonna be the number one team. I feel like that's been teased for, I don't know, the last 2 months, I guess, really since we got into the summer and before fall camp and the true college football preseason really got underway. It's like, all right, well, yeah, Texas, they have to they basically have to rebuild their offensive line, hope the guys that behind the four they lost to the NFL and so on and so forth are developed. But other than that, it's like, all right, the projections are Arch Manning is going to be a step up at quarterback, despite the fact that he's only started 2 games in his career and has played here and there, shown flashes. We haven't seen a full season out of him, but it's Steve Sarkisian. They have solid playmakers on both sides of the football, but they are replacing a lot. But it just seems like the expectation is, despite the fact that they lost a lot of NFL talent and they got to the semifinals for the second straight year, that this team could arguably be better. But the schedule is difficult, and there's just so much about it. But it's like, oh yeah, but they're number one. I'm like, all right, well,
Mhm.
I don't see an argument for anybody else because you could say, well, Penn State is arguably the best team. I think if any other team has the case to be number one right now, it probably is Penn State, just based on the fact of what they have brought back at quarterback and running back. They landed 3 transfer wide receivers, including the one, his name's escaping me off the top of my head right now, from Syracuse. But when you look at the guys that they brought in, of course, the defense they have, you could have 2 first-round picks on that defensive line. One, denied Dennis Sutton. Zane Duran's obviously really, really good. And, of course, Jim Knowles, the new defensive coordinator, getting him from Ohio State. So they, to me, Penn State, they have the best argument to be number one if you're not going to pick Texas. But then again, as the people who are detractors of Penn State, we track Paul Feinbaum every day here at Over and On Three because he's going to say something. He's going to be the one who's going to say, and others too. Well, James Franklin hasn't won the big one,
Sure.
But again, we're talking about the preseason and based on
Right.
what we can see on paper going into the first week of the season. So if I'm just taking history out of it, I'd say Penn State probably has a more legitimate argument to be number one, but if you told me Texas is your number one team, I'm not really going to fight you. But then if you keep going down the list, Rich, it's like, yeah, I can see this team being really good too. Ohio State, Clemson,
Yep.
Georgia, Notre Dame, obviously very good too. Could they have a case to be number one? Sure. Oregon, maybe not as much. Alabama, I think once you get back down to the top 5, top 6, that's where it kind of ends for me. It's like, yeah, if you told me any one of those top 6 were the number one team in the country to start out the season, I would have been like, okay, makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you look, so again, not to be confused, we're talking AP, you got the coaches
Yeah,
poll. So, like, for instance, Clemson, right? The coaches poll 6, AP 4.
right.
If you say who got it right, you look at the AP, maybe you don't. I mean, Clemson finished with 4 losses, right?
Mm,
I think it's a talented roster. So, again, they've got probably the best defensive line. You have
mm.
arguably the nation's top quarterback, right? In Klubnik. I don't think they're contenders inside the AC. I think they're ACC. I think they're national championship contenders. Should they been ranked higher than, say, a Penn State?
Like I said, with those top 5, top 6, if you told me any one of those teams were going to
You'd be
be
all
or
right
should be
with
the
it.
number one team, yeah, I would say your argument's probably valid. And again, without playing a single game yet, I'm not going to fight you on it. And obviously, with the way the rankings shake up right now, with Texas number one, Ohio State 3, we're going to get at least some answers the very first week when Texas goes to Ohio State
Of
in just
course.
2+ weeks time. So I've told you before, I think in the last couple of weeks, that I do like Clemson this year, at least to come out of the ACC and be more of a title contender for the within the entire CFP bracket than they were last year. Because you mentioned Klubnik, who's arguably the best quarterback, who's back this year. He's the Heisman contender. Gideon Davidson is their freshman running back. I think I alluded to him a couple weeks ago as well. He's going to be an X factor on that offense. But you got wide receivers like Brian Westco Jr., Antonio Williams, TJ Moore. Those are the top 3 guys. Good weapons, but it's really going to go through Klubnik and how that offensive line holds up. But I'm glad you brought up the defensive line because I feel like I've written and talked about their defensive front, at least the first two, the 2 guys that come to mind, and TJ Parker and Peter Woods, because those 2 guys could be first round picks when it
Oh,
comes to
sure.
26 draft. So I feel like based on how much I've written and talked about them, like how is this not more of a big, or how is this not a bigger conversation where they might have one of the best defenses in the country, at least when it comes to the pass rush and the interior of that defensive line with those 2 guys. If those 2 guys are firing off all cylinders at their peak, this is going to be a handful to deal with. No matter who you are, you're going to be like, oh man, Parker and Woods, one after another, switching both sides of the line. It's going to be a mess to be able to deal with them. So Clemson has all the pieces, and I feel like we almost forgot to mention his name, Dabo Sweeney. Let's not forget how good of
Mhm.
a coach he is. Regardless of what you think of or what he does in terms of how he speaks to the media, where he's pontificating, he's being like the philosopher of college football, or how he was very anti transfer portal for so long, and how he speaks about the game as a whole. But let's not forget this guy's won 2 national titles. He's been to a third. He's really, really good. I mean, come on, man. Dabo Swinney, if you have one of the best coaches in the country, I think that could give you a leg up over, like, let's just say CFP semifinal Q. Clemson, Penn State. If I had to pick it right now, I think I might lean towards Clemson because I again, doing the Feinbaum point, I think I
Right.
trust Sweeney more than I do James Franklin. So if you told me you wanted to make Clemson number one, I wouldn't put it past you. I wouldn't argue with it. I think they're fine at 4. Like I said, the top 6 right now, fine wherever they at or wherever they are right now. And then if you look at the first 4 weeks of the season, I think we'll have a better way to judge it once we get to at least October.
Yeah, it's all subjective, right? Because you got the coaches poll. If you go top 6, right? Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Georgia, Notre Dame, Clemson, right?
Mhm.
So now you got the top 6 or so
Yeah,
from the media.
all the
Texas,
same
Penn
teams.
State. What's that?
I said, "Oh, yeah, they're all the same teams." If you look at,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure if the AP and the coaches poll, they're all the top 6 are the same, just albeit a different order. But I think,
Right.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
those
So
are the 6 teams where it's like, okay, without trying to pick a dark horse or someone who comes out of nowhere, those are the 6 teams that I think the general consensus of college football media and fans are like, yeah, those are legitimate national title contenders, which makes
right.
the field wide open. But of course, as you go down the list, based on how the conferences stack up, yes, you're going to have more contenders like the Oregons, the Alabamas, Miami or LSU as well. So I think when you look at from that perspective, there's more contenders, but those top 6 to me are like, all right, those are the teams. Who's going to catch them?
Yeah, I think the more interesting conversation is when you get to the bottom rung, right? Because you got Ole Miss at 21, and people are going to sit there and say they're overrated. They're going to get shellacked when they take on, the meat and potatoes of their schedule. Now, obviously, they open up against Georgia State August 30th. Now, I'm wondering on a team like Ole Miss, if you think overrated at 21, too much emphasis is put on what transpired, last season results, right? So it's almost like that recency bias, right? So you got to kind of take a deep dive look into this season's roster. I mean, we talked a little bit about them when we started to break down the SEC. And the one highlighted point, I went back and I listened to it. You said, listen, they don't have a ton of, starters that are returning, right? I mean, I don't know where they were in the top 5 transfer class to make an immediate impact, but you look at Ole Miss at 21, overrated, underrated when it comes to that ranking.
Maybe a little underrated. Actually, no, I take that back. They're probably a little overrated. I mean, if you put them at like 24, 25, I'd say that's fine. They should be a top 25 team, so don't get me wrong. So I don't want to use the underrated or overrated metric too much with them. I think they're kind of where they're supposed to be. I think is my overarching point. But yeah, as we alluded to before, they got a lot of transfers. Their entire secondary is brand new with transfers, whether they're juniors or seniors. So I believe all 5 of those transfers are going to be the majority of the guys who are going to be starting in the back end, if not, at least having a big rotational role. So you look at that, their entire secondary is different. How's that going to hold up on their defense this year? The one thing I will say about their offense, they are very excited about Austin Simmons, their quarterback, redshirt sophomore. I believe he's the one who I think accelerated like 2 classes ahead in high school. So he's very young, but he's been in the system under Lane Kiffin for a couple of years. It's now his chance to start at quarterback. He's very, very exciting. And I think if he pans out, I kind of make it similar to what Bryce Underwood could potentially do for Michigan this year as a true freshman, should he be the starter. And I think he will be the starter for Michigan this year. So when you look at Austin Simmons, big lefty,
Mhm.
got a big arm. Can he operate Lane Kiffin's offense? And we know Kiffin's offense hasn't been a problem because they've been very productive. It's just a matter of the Lane Kiffin factor is where's that stinker going to be? I'm looking at their schedule last year. If you go back, they waxed through their first 4 opponents. They have their SEC opener queue and they play Kentucky. They lose 20-17 in September. They follow it up with a win over South Carolina. They lose that heartbreaker to LSU in overtime. They go on a bit of a heater and then they lose to Florida at the end of the year, which kind of really screwed their chances for the college football playoffs. They were a 9-3 regular season team last year. If they obviously flip one of those results, a lot of close games, they might be in the playoff last year. So is something like that going to happen again? I'm not really sure. I would bank on it. If I don't know where it's going to happen, but I'd probably bank on it. So when you look at them in totality, number 21, are they going to vault to, let's say, number 14 at some point in the season? Are they
Mm.
going to have the end of the last 3 weeks? Ole Miss is going to be in the hunt category. Kind of like how we do with the college
Yeah.
basketball tournament
Yep.
when we break down projected brackets for the 12-team college football playoff, you're going to be like, all right, Ole Miss can't really write them in right now, but they're in the hunt. Okay, so I'm looking at their non-conference opponents this year. Georgia State should be a win. They got Tulane a few weeks later. It's going to be a tougher game, but they do host them as well, and they host Washington State. So that's the good news for Ole Miss. And again, they have the Citadel. So I mean, it looks like the non-conference schedule shouldn't be too difficult, and especially as they have those games at home. But you have to go at Kentucky. You tripped up against them last year. They have to play LSU, and then they have Georgia, Oklahoma, and South Carolina all in a row in October, bleeding into November. And then who knows how that Florida game is going to end up this year? Because Florida could have a great season, or they could just falter under the big expectations they have of them this year. So Ole Miss, to me, to make my long point, end right here. They are where they should be right now, but just a lot of questions how the new secondary gels and if Austin Simmons is going to be that good right away. That is ultimately what's going to carry the Rebels from, okay, they're a fringe contender, or they're going to end up being an 8-14 that's like, hey, maybe next year.
So the AP, you look at the top 10: Texas, Penn State, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, Notre Dame, Oregon, Alabama, LSU, Miami. You got Notre Dame, Oregon, which got the final first place votes. Alabama, LSU, Miami round out the top 10, as I mentioned. SEC leads all conferences with 10 teams in preseason, top 25 most ever by a conference. I mean, Texas, welcome to the party. Here you go. Now, what'll be interesting is that, you know, you're opening up the season. You're the preseason top team, right? But yet you're opening up the season on the road against a third-ranked Ohio State team,
Mhm.
which, oh, by the way, is the defending champ. I think that's where people kind of look at it. Maybe I think it's the Arch Manning hype. Who knows? But if they get railroaded on the road, that's kind of the beauty with college football, right? Because a loss can really do you in. Two
Mhm.
losses and you're pretty much up, what's creek, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean I've seen some chatter where I mean again until I see it I'm not going to believe it. But remember how last year there was that whole conversation about these three SEC teams that are all 9-3 should get in over
Yeah.
the
Yep.
likes of
Yep.
like Indiana and SMU. Now, to me, if you have 3 losses, I'm not gonna say you should be automatically eliminated, but because you have 3 losses, like, don't lose more than 2 games. We've seen historically, if you lose, back at the 14 playoff, if you lose more than 1 game, you're pretty much screwed. For the 12-team playoff, if you lose that 3rd game, you're pretty much screwed, and, people wanna argue strength of schedule all they want. Texas has a really difficult schedule this year, so I've seen this thrown out there where it's like, they left out like Alabama last year at 9-3, but Alabama did lose to Vanderbilt. No, I mean, again, Vanderbilt won a bowl game last year, but they also had a horrible loss, if you remember, to Oklahoma, and Oklahoma was a borderline disaster last year. So we look at it from that standpoint, it's like 9-3 Texas. Are they going to get in? Probably not. But then you look at the schedule. Ohio State, huge non-conference game, and you look at that win or loss. I feel like the committee's going to be like, "Well, you played Ohio State," especially if Texas doesn't get railroaded. Like let's just say 27-24, 27-21, they lose
Close game. Yep.
at the Horseshoe. It's like, are you really going to penalize Texas, especially if they end up winning? 9 of the next 10 games,
Right.
or
Right.
if they finish 10-2, and Ohio State's 10-2, 11-1. Are you really going to penalize Texas for a close loss to open up the season against Ohio State? That's where that subjectivity comes in. Now, non-conference games aside, they have 3 in a row right after that, but they have to go at Florida. Of course, you have Red River against Oklahoma. They have to go at Georgia, and of course, they're playing Texas A&M to end the season. So the schedule is pretty difficult. Now, they don't play Alabama this year, which that could have been another like big tier type of game. So the schedule's difficult, but ultimately, especially if they, if they win that first game, I would imagine they're probably going to go undefeated. They're probably going to be 12-0, maybe one slip up, but at minimum, this team's going to be 11-1, 12-0. So, and it's funny you mentioned, the overhype of Arch Manning, and like, Texas getting a lot of hype. They are underdogs right now, albeit a 2.5-point dog at Ohio State. I feel like, and I think the feeling is that line's going to start shifting towards Texas, and they might end up being a road favorite. But when it's all said and done,
Oh,
weeks from now, because the money is going to be flying on at this point based on the offseason hype, and it's like Texas, Texas,
yeah, but
Texas.
you can't. You know this. You can't bet on hype. You can't gamble on
No, you
hype. You got.
no, you
You,
can't, and I think
yeah.
that's where bettors get in trouble, of course, and I think
Right.
because Texas has all the hype, and the only question about Ohio State right now is, okay, they lost a lot of NFL talent. Is there gonna be a championship hangover? And, of course, the quarterbacks knew with Julian Sayin was sitting on the bench after he transferred. He was at Alabama for a hot second, comes into Ohio State, sits the bench last year, learns, develops. He's probably gonna be the starter. Now, they haven't picked one yet, and it's still neck and neck according to Ryan Day. But to me, if Julian Sain's a starter, it's like, okay, there's your biggest question mark. Would you rather have Arch Manning, who is albeit, for lack of a better term, still kind of unproven, or Julian saying people are
Oh,
gonna
he's big
say
time unproven.
right.
You need a larger sampling size with Arch Manning.
Right,
There's yeah,
but if you have that, but the general consensus is gonna be if you said, "Okay, you have 2 unproven guys, but one's
sure. Who
Arch
you gonna
Manning,
take?
one's Julian saying you're going to pick Arch Manning, hence the money going towards Texas," and it's
Yeah.
like, "Okay, what happens now?" Let's just say if they are the betting favorites week 1 or, week 0, whatever the heck we call it. If they are the betting favorites and they lose, how does the committee look at that? I don't think it's gonna be that big of a drastic change, but it's just an interesting tidbit to think about as you go through the season. So, could Texas finish 9-3 get into the playoff? If they lose to the right teams, maybe they have an argument. But to me, I'm still of the case where this team needs to be 10-2, rolling on all cylinders at minimum in order to make the playoff. Obviously, depending on how the SEC shakes out, 10-2 might get them into the SEC championship game because who knows? Alabama and Georgia, Texas, Florida, LSU, everyone might beat each other. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out, especially when we get to the midseason point and we can really start projecting it out. But that first game will tell us a lot, but I don't think it's going to be the end all be all for either team, and in particular Texas.
Yeah, and remember too, right? You're betting on the team, not the back of the jersey.
Yeah,
Mike in Ohio chimes in. Q, correct me if I'm wrong. This is the same Penn State team that has beaten the Buckeyes just once under James Franklin,
yeah.
zero times since 2016. Get the blank out of here. He's a big time Ohio State fan, so
But
obviously,
but it is a good point, and
yeah,
it's funny that's brought up because Franklin's beaten them once, and again you go back to the lone Big Ten championship game that James Franklin and Penn State won. It was 2016. Penn State had 2 losses that year. That was the time of the 14 playoff. They got in over Ohio State into the championship game, but because of those 2 losses, despite winning that game, Ohio State was still the playoff team that year because their lone loss was to a Big Ten champion with 2 losses. And you could see the irony in that. It's like, well, we won the conference. Why aren't we getting in? Well, because you have 2 losses, you had a bad loss. I believe that they either lost to Purdue or so it was a bad loss for Penn State. I almost don't even want to say they might have lost to an out of conference foe in Pitt that year in 2016, if memory serves me correct. I just remember they had a bad loss, but then the argument for Ohio State that year was, well, they're 11-1. Their only loss was a close loss to the team that ended up winning the conference. It's like, okay,
right.
we're going to put you in because back then the committee was like, if you're in the 14 playoff, you have 2 losses, you are not getting in. That it wasn't a written rule, but it was basically an unwritten rule, unspoken rule, and that's what ended up happening there. So, and they got back last year, Penn State, but of course with a 12-team playoff, you have more leeway to get in with again with 2 losses. So this team on paper should win the Big Ten, should be arguably the number 1 seed because I think if Penn State plays the way they're hyped to be, Q, they probably should beat Ohio State this year, home or away, doesn't matter. They probably should go 12-0, go to the Big Ten championship game, either play Ohio State for a rematch, play Oregon, play somebody else. They probably should go 12-0, or sorry, 13-0 or 12-1, win the Big Ten, and be the number 1 or 2 seed in the playoff if it all breaks right for them. That's what it should be. It's just a matter of will James Franklin not have that little slip up at some point during the year.
And the same argument can be made for Texas. If you
Yeah,
go on the road with all the hype and you beat Ohio State, I mean, now you're talking about Texas, one of the best teams in the country, one of the best recruiting teams in the country, one of the smartest offensive minds, and head coach, blah, 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 blah. So, like, I think it is recency bias. And again, you know, it's a cup of coffee for Arch Manning.
yeah,
That's the sampling size, period. So they're winning in the hype category,
yeah.
but you got to win on the field. I am curious. I want to switch gears for a minute. Did you
Mm.
see this? Well, I'm sure you saw the story about the Oklahoma starting quarterback. Is it Mateer, John Mateer,
Yeah,
about
John Mateer, yep.
the screenshots, of the sports gambling with the Venmo account surfaced online
I did.
Monday. Yeah.
This was a huge discussion in the work chat over the last couple days.
Well, I think listen, I think there's something to this story. Now, for those that haven't been following this kid basically had all these screenshots from a Venmo account that surfaced on Monday. He's denied that he's ever been involved with gambling, saying Tuesday was a inside joke with his friends. But again, if you look closer at some of these screenshots, he did use the term sports gambling in memos for transactions back in 2020. He was a freshman at Washington State. Listen, and I think the transactions had to do with a teammate of his at the time, but it just again it strengthens my point when we get into the sports betting, sports gambling conversation with athletes, whether it's college athletes, professional athletes. Hell, maybe we're going to have this conversation about high school athletes down the
Mhm,
road, which would be sickening and a big time problem. In light of the fact that Michael Porter Jr. came out and talked about his brother's gambling addiction.
mhm.
So, like, you hear something like this, and you mentioned that it was kind of, a hot little topic in the Slack channel at work. What's the sentiment here with you guys?
It's a little divided just because I think some people are just kinda beyond, like, okay, gambling's not, for the most part, gambling's pretty much legal throughout almost the entire country, depending, obviously depending upon what state you're in, but it's like, if you I'll just give you my perspectives. I don't wanna speak for my
Yeah,
co
no, give me yours.
but, like, my perspective is, on the surface, I'm like, do I really care that he bets on college football? No. But on the other hand, you are a college athlete, and it is funny that there is, like, right now, there is no NCAA investigation. There's no internal
Nope.
investigation from Oklahoma other than, like, him other than officials asking him, "Have you ever gambled?" "No." "Okay, we're done." And then but then he releases a statement on it, and it's like, it's not an old adage, but you know how you wanna say, you know how we wish public relations could be like, "Well, it's not a big deal. There's no need to address it," but that's not how public relations work.
No, and you
We
address it,
want it
which
to
is
work
almost
that
like
way.
an admission of guilt.
Right, you want it to work that way where it's like, well, if it's nothing, there's no need to respond to it, but you have to respond to it. That's just the way it works. Otherwise, you look guilty regardless. But then if you respond to it, you also look guilty regardless. So it's a lose-lose situation for him. But the fact that he cited that it's an inside joke with either friends or former teammates, it's like, okay, could I buy that? Maybe on one hand, in the back of my brain, I'm like, yeah, oh, let's screw around. It's like, here's my like, it's almost like a message. It's like a direct fu to the NCAA where it's like, hey guys, here is my big sports gambling ticket that I put on, the other day, and I bet on this game. But like, is it that funny at that
It's
point?
not.
And my biggest problem with it is, and whether something comes of it or not is, I'm not going to be affected by it which way or the other. But the fact that it seems like more and more people are saying this is not a big deal. That worries me to an extent because we just had the whole gambling investigation from a couple of years ago with all the Iowa and Iowa State athletes. I believe it was like what, between 40 to 60 athletes across both athletic departments and multiple sports, and especially including football. It's like, and then it goes back to the whole, to get into a larger conversation, it goes back to the Pete Rose conversation where, he bet on his teams to win. It's like,
Sure.
but like, even then, it's like, yeah, is it harmless from that perspective? Sure. But when you cite the integrity of the game, regardless of the sport, you can't do that because then you have to go into the weeds, which is where, you may have insider knowledge and then you're basically cheating the system, and it's unfair to people who don't have that information, so on and so forth. It's like insider training, of course, insider trading if we get into the political realm, of course. So when you look at what Mateer was doing, even if it wasn't with a bookie or an official book, and I believe it's still against the rules if he's betting money with just his friends or his teammates, even if it's just internal like that, I believe that's still against the rules. So it's like, at the very least, Q, I would have hoped there would have been like some sort of small investigation to seeing what these transactions actually were. The problem is if you can't trace it back to an actual bookie or a sports book,
No.
I think your hands are tied at that point. I'm not an expert in that type of stuff, so that's a little bit out of.
There's yeah, there's always a pay listen, college athletes are prohibited from betting on any sport offered by the NCAA, right?
Right.
And you can lose your eligibility. But there's always a paper trail,
Yeah.
period. And the problem is, and you just brought it up, the fact that OU, their athletic department or OU athletics issued a statement saying they take these allegations, of gambling seriously. They're going to work closely with the NCAA, but they're unaware of any NCAA investigation and has no reason to believe there is one pending, kind of speaks volumes to where we're at right now. And that to me is the problem,
Mhm.
that they're not even going to do their due diligence and even investigate this or try to investigate it in house is a major problem because if you got a prominent player like this, right, who is playing on a team that's ranked in the top 20, they're going to be on national TV, or even if they're not per se, but you're the
Right.
starting quarterback of a major university, a major football season. How do you not, when they open up the season against Illinois State, I'm sorry, like if you're doing that broadcast, that's got to be mentioned at some point in some way, shape, or form. You just can't sweep
Right.
it under
It
the
well,
rug.
and you bring that up because it's like it wasn't just social media fodder, or it wasn't like a Twitter theory, which we see all the time, or it's not like it was AI or something like that, which we obviously we all have to be aware of at that point, considering what can be faked at this point, people falling for it, then that's how misinformation keeps going, and these athletes are like, well, I never said this, or so on and so forth. But he addressed this exact incident, and he
Correct.
admitted that he did something, which was an exchange, and it's like, can you imagine? And again, regardless of what you think of people digging into his Venmo transaction history, first of all, mine's on private, so I don't know why his isn't on private, considering an athlete of his stature, even if it was like what 3-4 years ago. First of all, that should be private. Second of all, it's like if you're going to cover your trail a little bit, like shouldn't you just like make up something completely out of the ordinary that has nothing to do with sports gambling? And it's funny, Q. He said sports gambling, but then he put in parentheses the game USC UCLA, which was a noteworthy game a couple years ago. But I think it was what 48-45, and a lot of people lost their bets because the game was it was so crazy. I don't
Right.
remember the exact details of the game, but it was a noteworthy game from a betting perspective, and it's like ironically, you're going to make your very specific inside joke the very next day for a financial transaction. At the very least, to me, it has to be looked at. And
Of course it does.
I'm not advocate. I'm not saying this kid's running a gambling ring, or he's been betting on games his whole life, or he's betting against his team, or he's cheating the system. I'm not saying that at all. I think it has to be looked at because we've seen in the past already, and we just from my perspective, from the college wrestling perspective, guys got in trouble for this stuff. College athletes have gotten in trouble a lot over the last couple of years because of sports gambling, and it's like you're all of a sudden going to brush this one under the rug. To me, that doesn't make any sense. So even if the investigation comes up empty, it's like, all right, well, you did your due
That's the thing.
diligence,
Just do your due diligence.
right?
Appease us.
I
Appease
I I
us.
I don't see how this became a huge deal on social media, but the fact that they had to address it from an athletic department standpoint, and for him to put out a statement for himself on his own social media, to me, this speaks volumes of
Of
like,
course.
okay, yeah, okay, at least if to me, it's serious where you have to look at it, and if nothing comes up, okay, then they were telling the truth. If not, something big could come out of this, and it could really highlight a bigger problem because it's unfortunate that the world of NIL and the transfer portal and how much sports gambling companies are basically infiltrating professional and collegiate athletics. This is a problem because this is why not to be an old man getting to say get off my lawn, but this is why 20 years ago where it was like the NFL and Vegas never thought that would have happened. You'd be like, absolutely not, never putting a Super Bowl
Oh,
there.
I always knew it was going to happen.
Right. Yeah, I'm saying from the NFL's perspective,
Yeah.
they were so hard, they were so, they're being hard asses for it. They were just like, we're never
Right.
gonna do that. We're never gonna do this. We're never gonna do this. And now it's like, yeah, this is before we know it, 10 years from now, the NFL on Fox is gonna be the NFL on Fox presented by DraftKings for all we know. I
Oh,
mean,
it's pretty much everything.
it pretty
Pretty
much
much is right now.
now. So I mean, but this is the danger that you open up, and it's like these kids when they sign their letters of intent. Well, those really aren't a thing anymore. But when you are an NCAA athlete, when you are a professional athlete, it's in the contracts or the documents you sign that you cannot wager on
Correct.
sports.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. So it's like, yeah, if you make a joke about it, and, we talk about making jokes about other serious matters, and if you were joking, there are consequences for that. So I don't know why this is any different.
Nope. I agree 100%. The fact that he had to come out and say what he said.
Mhm.
Oklahoma, they use Prohibet. So it's a monitoring of sports gambling activities. So it's basically it's part of the betting industry. It basically you have to show your identity on it. So if you
Right.
show your identity on it, you can't fake, you can't BS. It's
Mhm.
very secure. So they'll know who's betting, and it's meant to prevent college athletes from betting. But I always believe there's there's some kind of workaround with that. I know a lot of the conferences are using it. I just think, to your point, you're trying to enforce athlete betting and athlete betting rules. Um, and like you said, what was it, 2018? You had all those kids from Iowa. I mean, that was just not a good look at all. I'm telling you, this story's not going to go away. And what's going to happen too is people will now watch these games, specifically this team. They'll look at the lines, And if something fishy, if they're down, you know, down three late and they're favored by three, and obviously a touchdown covers the nut, he throws a pick six, or he throws a horrible pass, or someone's gonna, at the goal line red zone pick. I'm telling you, like at some point of the season, we will revert back to this conversation and this kid.
Yeah, without a doubt, and that Iowa State incident happened, between the years of 2021 and 2023. I just wanted to clarify
2021.
that. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, right, and
For some reason, I thought it was past. I thought it was prior to that. So, but thanks for
yeah,
the
it was
clarification.
only a couple of years ago, and I guess for some reason, maybe it was just the amount of bets and the amount of athletes that I started conflating the numbers, and it looks like that, I'm reading a report from the AP just from, this is actually from, in May, because the NCAA took disciplinary action against 5 current or former Iowa State football support staff members. So I think I think I was conflating the 60 athletes, but I just remember it was
Wasn't the quarterback involved?
right. Yeah, I believe it might have been Rocco Becht, or a different quarterback.
Hunter, Hunter,
I don't wanna
Hunter.
say it was Rocco Becht off the top of my head. I have to
Okay,
look it up right now, but, Hunter Deckers. Okay, hu it
there.
was
Thank you.
110. Yeah, thank you. Okay, yeah, okay. So, yeah, that he was the one, and I wanna say maybe there were a lot of athletes, but, I'm just the numbers are escaping me right now, but when you have a big scandal, like, we just had this scandal, so it's like, why, and based on the years that it happened, the fact that Tier was, quote, unquote, "joking," his words, inside joking, or had an inside joke, what, 3 years ago when this happened, when he was at Washington State? Kind of fishy with the years matchup
Fishy,
right there. So it's
fishy.
like,
Yeah.
why, why say this whole gambling scandal is like oh, it's gonna be the death of college sports. This is horrible. This is horrible. And then we see this, and then just because I guess this kid's good and we like him personally, it's like, oh yeah, not a problem. Oklahoma's like, we asked him, he said no. We said okay.
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't see what I don't see what's any different. Joking or not. Unfortunately, just to be in a standard society, if you have rules, and if you're joking about
Correct.
said serious rules, there's going to be consequences for certain.
Consequences, right? Without the rules, we have chaos. Chaos is anarchy. All right, what do you got going on this week, as you mentioned, on three, and then on the high school front?
So a couple pods that are just out now, over at On3 Wrestling. You can find that on my YouTube page. I just had Rutgers head coach Scott Goodell on. Of course, great conversation with him as always. Known him for over a decade at this point. He just announced that Rutgers is partnering with FanStake, which is a new NIL outlet. So you can now just stake your own athletes. It's a great partnership. First college wrestling team to do so after they've already done some football and basketball teams throughout Division One. So check out that pod. Chuck Smith Show just dropped on Cable Atlantic Live last night for Mainland Regional Football. That'll be a weekly thing starting in season. So I believe September 2nd will be our next show. Then that'll be weekly recapping Mainland Regional Football for our South Jersey friends in our backyard. And then last thing for me is CWA Showcase 5 on Saturday. That'll be up in Toms River at the RWJ Barnabas Arena at Toms River North High School. The Championship Wrestling Association, all these former college stars that are, maybe not on the world or Olympic team, but, they're in the thick of things. They're just are, guys coming out of retirement. We have a great card lined up on Saturday night at 7 o'clock. So CWA, you can look up the Championship Wrestling Association, get your tickets online at the website. Of course, 24/7 streaming. We'll have our pay-per-view link as well. So I'll be on the call with that with my guys Mario Mason and Jackson Turley as well. So that's gonna be a fun event on Saturday night. Really looking forward to that. Getting back into a little bit of a wrestling mode before we go full-fledged football here.
All right, brother. Great stuff as always. We'll give you a follow on all the fronts, and keep up the great work. We'll do it again next week. Always appreciate a couple moments, pal. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Rich. Thanks, man.
All right, there you have it, my guy, Nick Costco on Three Sports. Let's get to some of these comments. Yeah, good stuff. Man says, thank God Costco's here. I tried insomnia cookies for the first time. Damn good. You guys blaming the Death Star mic? The Death Star mic is fine. I told you we are on multiple platforms, right? Man says, Hour Plus, Banker Hour Wednesday. Perhaps. De facto, anyone been watching any given Saturday on Netflix? Good breakdown of the SEC. I have not watched that. I will definitely check that out. Yeah, the gambling thing's interesting to see how it plays out with this kid. And yes, Nick was 100% accurate. That was a couple years ago, and the quarterback was involved. But this is what happens. You kind of open up Pandora's box there, and that's never a good thing. 4:48, quick timeout. We will come back on the other side. As I mentioned, about an hour plus to play with today, and we'll keep you updated on some of the platforms that will be on, and also back your play. We've dropped a bunch of new episodes. Check them out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and also Amazon Music. Quick timeout. We'll come back. All right, a couple of minutes to play with before we get out of here. Appreciate everyone keeping us locked in on the YouTube channels, respectively, as well as X. Back in the saddle tomorrow and Friday as well. Don't forget, also, um, we have dropped a bunch of new back your plays. Let me get you caught up to speed on what's going on baseball wise. Brewers open it up over the Pirates 10-5 right now. Nats and the Royals are knotted up. Rangers up on top of the D-backs 3-2. Padres playing really good baseball of late. They're blanking the Giants 7-0. Phils and Reds are underway. Mets later today. I did mention the uh, NL Cy Young odds. We've kind of been talking about this for a while now. Both, well, really in both leagues respectively. But if you look at the NL, Christopher Sanchez making a little run here with Wheeler. Obviously, the kid from Pittsburgh, Skinnis, is right there at minus 350, the shortest odds. But you have two Phillies, 2 and 3 respectively. Wheeler's plus 300. Christopher Sanchez, sneaky, sneaky, sneaky Christopher Sanchez, plus 600. Kevin C chimes in. Q, any chance that the Giants take a flyer on a veteran in Beckham? No. I saw that Beckham, quote, announced his retirement. No, check that. It was Adam Schefter who announced his retirement for him. Remember when Beckham got hurt that second time around with the Giants, and then he made all those comments about Eli, and then the Giants decided we're trading you to purgatory Cleveland? I remember coming on the air and said, Odell Beckham's going to be that wide receiver that's going to play on 4 or 5 teams. He's played for the Giants, the Browns, the Rams, the Ravens, and now the Dolphins. Now, when he was healthy in his prime, he was great. He's not that guy anymore. If I'm the Giants, I don't need to take a flyer on Odell Beckham. Go play with Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh. I just that ship has sailed. Taking a flyer on some of these guys. They can't play anymore. There is a again reason that these guys have been cut and or released. Period. Richie J chimes in. Q, what'd you think of the Bills signing? He's a Buffalo fan. I've known Richie J for a long time, and he is a disgruntled Bills fan. You paid your running back. What else is new? I mean, it's the NFL. We know backs are going to get paid. We've talked about it. We've seen it. I like Cook. I think he's a very good back. 4 years, $48 million extension. Obviously, here's a player that's just 25 years of age. He burst on the scene last year. He averaged, right around 5 yards a carry. Actually, had a pretty good 2023, but you're talking about a running back that had what 16, 17, 18 total touchdowns. I mean, obviously, he's part of that offense that hums and clicks, along with a all-world MVP quarterback in Josh Allen. It's the going rate right now. It's the going rate. I've seen a lot of these inter squad um, scrimmage fights that have been going on, which is fascinating, right? Because every player is getting a little testy. I did see that one clip where one of the Cincinnati defenders, I think, touched Burrow, like hit Burrow. Oh my goodness! I mean, come on, man! You don't touch the quarterback when you guys are practicing like that, right? Kevin chimes back in. Any chance you think Dart's going to start sooner rather than later? Sorry, Q had to ask. That's because all the talking heads are saying Jackson Dart should start week 1 for the Giants. The same talking heads that said Shedeur Sanders should start week 1 for the Browns. Now you got Sanders is banged up, so you kind of got to pump the brakes a little bit on that. Not going to play Saturday, so loses another opportunity to showcase his arm and his talent and impress the head coaches. Vince probably has to be beside himself. He had tickets to go to Cleveland and the Philadelphia Eagles preseason. But it is what it is. Joe D chimes in. Q, I will say this about you. You were the first one that said Kansas City's taking a step back. It seems like all the national talking heads now are riding that one. I told you, man. I don't know why you guys, I'm not saying listen to me. I'm not saying don't listen to me. I jumped on that. I started that conversation after the Super Bowl. I think I said that dynasty was done for Kansas City. I think I mentioned it then. I said pretty much it's all she wrote for Kansas City. They're getting older. They're getting older. They've got waxed in the Super Bowl. The Philadelphia Eagles pretty much broke them, right? The Eagles pretty much broke them. So we'll do a little more NFL later in the week. Also, Jonathan Marshall. I want to get into this Porter story too later on in the week with the NBA and the whole gambling conversation, because it really is. You read these stories and you say to yourself, man, I didn't think it was that bad. And then you go back and you listen what some of these players have to say. And now you've got a player talking about his brother and his own vices. It's going to get worse, right? Before it even gets better. And I don't think that's saying much. I think these leagues now that have opened their arms and embraced the sports betting and gambling element, they are in for a rude awakening, a very rude awakening. All right, as I mentioned, you got a couple new editions of BYP dropping later on this week. We'll get it in gear for Football Friday tomorrow, hour as well. See if we can track down Jonathan Marshall. Talk a little baseball too with Steve Gardner. We're going to start to look ahead now as we broke down the divisions, but we'll start to really get into these divisions as far as, who's going to win a division, potential wild card playoff teams. We got a couple more player props that we want to get into on the defensive side of the ball. We've been doing a lot, Lloyd and I, on the defensive side of the ball. We want to hit the defensive side of the ball on that. But we're going to start wrapping up. We got the fights in about an hour later on, so keep it locked in. We'll give you some updates on that on my social media accounts. RG and X at Rich Q on Q. Don't forget, you can follow me on TikTok, Rich Q on the mic, and my YouTube channels. And I mentioned big time. We've got a whole bunch of platforms for the NFL season, multiple YouTube channels. We are working with the 2 outlets potentially out west, one up north as well. We will let you know about some of the time changes with the show. We're also going to be pre-recording some shows, and we're going to be firing them off on Roku as well. So we got some good stuff cooking, and we want to keep you guys updated on that. Give us a follow as always on our social media accounts. I don't know about the update. Who knows? That's a very good question. I don't know. Now, now the actor himself said that he was blackballed from Hollywood, because he didn't kiss an actress in one of the movies. He said he got blackballed. So we don't know. And I don't know about that app as well. I really don't. What was that actor's name? Neil McDonough or McDonough. Yeah, blackballed, right? I'm trying to think of what other movies. So he did, well, he was in Yellowstone. He was also in Tulsa King, which is set for season 3. Samuel Jackson, who's in everything, will be in that. He was also in The Last Rodeo and Homestead. So I don't really know if he really was blackballed, right? He said he refused to perform an intimate scene, particularly kissing an actress other than his wife. But isn't that acting? Right? Isn't that acting? That's, you gotta read the room on that one, don't you? Right? And I know you're talking about the gambling guest we had. I know. De facto, who can never read the room, who steps up the AFC this year? Well, you'll have to find out later on in the week for that answer. Correct, madman, correct. And I know you're talking about my guest that I had on. Yeah. Who portrayed the man who portrayed making a sports betting act. We don't know. We're going to have to track him down. I think that app was supposed to be done by now, right? I have to go back and look at the archives, as we like to say. Did we bookmark the tape? But I have to go back and look at the archives. I definitely have to do that. All right, 5 o'clock straight up, back in the saddle. Mignana, as I mentioned, we got to call the fights. We got a lot of football to get into, and I mentioned we'll give you some show news and notes and a couple different platforms and homes you'll be able to find us. We're also rebranding for the NFL season, so we'll have a lot of fun with that as well. Yeah, 10 months. Okay, so there you go. That app should have been done by now. That's almost a year. That app should have been done by now. Period. It should have been done. I agree. I'm going to have to find what's going on. Maybe we'll have him back on again because, you like the villains. You definitely like the villains. All right. You got baseball. We'll recap it tomorrow. Mix in a little NBA talk with the Porter conversation. Get back into the NFL talk as well. Preseason week number 2 will be among us. So we will dive into that. Good stuff from Nick Costco jumping on board from on 3. You guys keep it locked in. As I mentioned, don't forget to follow me on all social media accounts, IG and X at RichQ TikTok, Rich Q on the mic. Good stuff with the comments. I'll read them off on Facebook. We're going Facebook Live next week as well. So we got a lot that we will be sprouting out. But with that being said, appreciate you guys keeping us locked in. Have a wonderful Wusa Wednesday, a little fast-paced edition of Middays with Q. Back in the saddle mañana. As always, be safe, be sound. Hasta luego, un día.